Michael.
Well, our panel is still with us. Just a quick thought on just the basic premise here that, in effect, all of IS, is what he is saying, are Muslims. It is a problem for Muslims.
It's a problem for Muslims to deal with, but that particular view is very naive and very ignorant, actually, because he's accepting the claim of Al-Qaeda and IS that they represent true Islam. And he's accepting that claim and saying, therefore, Islam is a problem, which, as I said, is utterly ignorant. And what we have in Islam is centuries of debate around these issues. We've had rebels and violent groups like this before, and Muslims have a rich civilization and theology and spirituality and everything else, very broad and very deep. And we have immense resources to fight back against this kind of thing, which is going on all over the world. It's not just, well, let's get rid of Islam and we'll solve the problem.
This has been something that's been talked about for a while. Should Muslims stand up, condemn what we're seeing? You are very clear in your mind that there's a premise of guilt there that is wrong.
Well, the presumption that anybody should have to apologise for or condemn an action which they directly have no bearing upon is a presumption of guilt, which is entirely problematic. The fact is, scholarly figures, so figures of authority within Islam, can and absolutely do condemn these actions. But your average lay Muslim has no more or less responsibility to try and tackle Boko Haram in Nigeria or ISIS in Iraq and Syria than any other citizen. And I think part of the problem is the way that we discuss these issues. You know, when we essentialize them and render them Islamic problems, terming them jihad, rather than assessing the sort of complex political factors at hand, what we're really talking about is a violence which is problematic and requires a solution. The solution is a political one because the problem is political. That doesn't mean there aren't ideological similarities in some senses across these movements, but the solution to these problems are localized, and those are the things we ought to be talking about.
Professor, where are you on this notion of condemnation? Because, Suma, you were making the point when we were talking before that, and used the phrase, we need to recapture Islam from those voices. Where are you on this?
I think it's right, but I think we need more, media coverage on other voices, not only when we have a problem with violent extremism, and to listen, because many people are telling us, you don't speak enough, but we are not always heard, and we don't have primetime TV program when we can speak. And I think we have to do three things. The first is, once again, to have a clear religious discourse on why the way they are using jihad, the way they are using even Islamic State or Caliphate is wrong. So we need to do this work, and we are doing it, but we need to make it heard, to spread this message that what is Islam. This is the first thing that we have to do. There is a second thing that we have to do, is that behind this, because we had in the past people who were extremists and using Islam, there is a mindset here. And this, I don't call them fundamentalists. I talk about literalist and dogmatic minds. And once again, here there is something that is needed from the Muslim scholars, is to be quite clear on this very narrow interpretation of Islam that it's upstream from all the use towards violence. We have to come to this. And there is a third thing that we have to do, because we can't just speak about Islam. What he's doing here by saying this is Islam is just very simplistic, not taking into account the political dimension. And this is where we, once again, and me as a European, I have to be clear on which type of Islam I'm promoting, but also not to be naive on the political arena, where we have our own government sometimes dealing with people who have a very narrow understanding of Islam, a binary vision of Islam, and then they come to us and say, you have to condemn, but you have to be consistent. The British government, the European government should be consistent when it comes to with whom you are dealing, not only when it comes to violence.
And Doctor, in a sense, the definition has evolved. I mean, at what point did it evolve to take in the killing of other Muslims?
Well, the first thing actually is to look at the narrative of the violence in the media itself. Look at the Boko Haram crisis, for instance. I mean, the kind of narrative that is given, it's like a kind of war in which Muslims are trying to exterminate Christians in northern Nigeria and so on. And this is completely wrong. We have a problem on ground. People believe that, there are people that have argued that it's a problem for Islam. It's not a problem for Islam. It's a problem for Muslims to tackle, just like Professor has argued. It's a problem for us to now try to change that narrative, make the world aware of the fact that this is not Islam.
I'm going to have to pause you there. We will continue the debate in a moment or two. You can get in touch also on Twitter.